I'd like to call the committee of the whole meeting for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, July 5th, 2016 to order with roll call, please.
McAlpine,
Here.
Chapman,
Here.
Cavelli,
Here.
Dudek.
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now go to the public comments portion of the meeting. Is there anybody here that would like to address the village board?
I think we already did our.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comments. We have consideration of the June 21st, 2016 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Were there any changes, edits, corrections?
Not here.
None said. They'll go to the consent agenda. Thank you very much. And the same for the June 21st, 2016 Village Board meeting minutes. Were there any changes, corrections, edits? No?
Mayor, I'd just like to, for the record, say that I abstained on Committee of the Whole meeting minutes because I recused myself.
Okay. All right, we'll do that. We'll do
As
that.
amended.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, moving to a discussion regarding the downtown Metro train improvement.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening for the committee, we have some revised exhibits from our architect, Muller & Muller, who has made some revisions to our proposed station and warming shelter design based on the feedback from the last committee meeting. This is just a brief overview of the schedule and the process. Currently, we're in the schematic design phase. So if there's consensus to move forward with this design, staff will direct our architect to submit the layout and the design for the station to Metra for review, and then begin our site engineering analysis and development of the contract plans and specifications. At the last committee meeting, we had some feedback which ranged from, which listed here actually. First of all, the desire for a vintage look, concerns with the scale of the roof itself and the length and the size of it, requests for a cupola, dormers for other details on the rooftop, improved appearance and presence along the Route 14 side of the building. There was consensus from the committee to not add the air conditioning, cooling to the waiting area portion of the building, as it's not currently required by the railroad. There was requests for consideration for a clock tower and also requests for sustainable initiatives such as solar panels and photovoltaic glass. So before you is the revised sketches from the architect. You can see in the upper left-hand image, the Route 14 side of the station does show a reduced height in the peak of the rooftop. So they've lowered the two sides of the extensions as well, based on a reconfiguration of the layout of the building. They're proposing consideration for a decorative fence with a half masonry wall to help break up the linear feel and the narrowness of the whole site, along with a landscaped planter in front of the building at the Route 14 side. As I mentioned, there's a stepped roof line, so now it's not a continuous mass as in the previous version, but now it's symmetrical in nature. 4 functional dormers for ventilation were added on each side of the building. And then lastly, the waiting area on the northwest side of the platform will be increased in size through the relocation of the HVAC and mechanical room. With new design, just for comparison purposes, these are the stations, the suburban stations in the Union Pacific Northwest line. As you can see how our station varies slightly or significantly actually as compared to a lot of the neighboring stations. A lot of the other stations have traditional looks and feels. Ours, I think with the addition of those new dormers, the suggestion of the committee, as well as our the two-stepped roof line, I think it's a bonnet roof line, that's helped kind of set this one apart from many of the other buildings in the line. And then for comparison, these are some other stations throughout the Metro system, all on the various lines. Many of the stations have just traditional straight roof. I think the dormers that were added do set ours apart once again. We also show some other examples of the cupola, which was also requested. The architect decided that the most appropriate, at least approach for consideration and discussion tonight would be to go with the dormers. One, they're more consistent with the architectural and vintage feel with the style of the roof that is present in the rest of the design. And secondly, they also have function because we're omitting the air conditioning in the waiting area. Those ventilation dormers will actually help provide the ability to vent out the excess heat through a fan system. And lastly, they did consider at our request, could a cupola be added at the same time? And the architect felt that if we did add that, it might compete with the overall design itself and be a little bit too busy with the peak and the two steps in the row. But that's something we would like your feedback on this evening. From the sustainability aspect, the consultant looked at both glass options. Appears that primarily the main reason we don't recommend going with the solar panels is from the safety side that the railroad would have. They would have to approve the use of the panels, and being that close to the train platform, as well as at the angles that are necessary to make them the most effective, there are concerns with glare for the conductor and the train engineers. However, our architect did recommend a possible alternative to consider, which would be the use of some newer generation solar films on the existing, or the new glass windows in the structure. They would maintain more or less a transparent view, which is important from the safety aspect for both police and for the comfort of the users of the building itself. But they also have the ability to cost effectively reduce the amount of energy use from the heating perspective.
Okay.
So if the committee would like us to continue to explore that option, we can consider it as an alternate in design, and if we can afford it based on the overall budget of the project, we can include it. The photovoltaic glass was also researched. This was found to be one of the more cutting-edge technologies out there, and it's gaining a little momentum in use in Europe and Asia in particular. The architect wasn't aware of any specific U.S. examples of the technology for, at least for the window side of the options for the technology. There's a few examples of skylights and some valance walls, but not windows themselves. As you can see in the summary there, their recommendation was, as compared, at least currently, compared to solar panels, the costs and the effectiveness probably don't warrant their use, especially with the cost levels that we're talking about for our station. But it is a newer technology, and that could change in the future, and possibly could be something to retrofit if the costs come down and the performance continues to evolve.
Thanks for looking at that, Eric.
Sure. And lastly, the clock tower alternatives. As we mentioned at the previous discussions, Muller had indicated that Metra has moved away from approving clock towers on the actual buildings themselves as of late, primarily because of the issues they've had with if the clocks become slightly off in time. There's issues with commuters that are kind of rushing to the last minute to meet their trains, and the clock tower, the clock itself may not match the actual timetable and the arrivals of the trains. That being said, they showed us some off-the-shelf examples of some clocks that could be utilized maybe in the vicinity of the train station or mainly in the downtown area. One option could be if the station building, the current station building is removed, we could be able to maybe incorporate one of these types of features in that location. One other option to consider was partnerships and sponsorships with service organizations that could help maybe drive this particular element as part of a separate project.
We like it.
And with that, I'll look for your feedback on the proposed design changes here, and if the committee has any questions.
I like it just the way it is.
Looks good.
Yeah, I like the changes. I think it looks really good.
I agree, I like them too. I like that.
With respect to the clock, how do folks feel? And I want to emphasize that while no guarantees, past experience in our quick research of other municipalities, from time to time you can get service clubs or other private businesses that may want to be a sponsoring agency for some amenities such as that. And there are some best practices and not so best practices that we've already learned from some of those agreements with other suburbs, just in terms of making sure that the quality of the clock is sufficient, so it's functional over time, parts exist, things like that. And we're not necessarily recommending a clock, from the standpoint of the village funding it all, but probably with the mindset of, could this be a sponsorship opportunity and another nice downtown amenity?
I'd like to see that. That's something that we've been talking about, different clubs in town for years, is a message board. We tried to put one out across the street in front of Veterans Park, but it just wouldn't work, the type of sign from Mike Ryan. He was going to give it to us. We couldn't get that together. Putting up a digital sign with all the different kinds of events that are going on in the community. The Park District has a real nice one down at J.C. Park at Three Oaks and Silver Lake Road, something like that. And I think we could get excitement from the clubs, especially with the great response that we got from the village helping out with the grant program. I think that's a good turnaround and good faith, and I'd be happy to explore the initial possibilities about that with those clubs, if that's okay with the rest of the board.
Okay, so yes to the clock concept overall?
Yes.
And then, okay. And then we'll come back with design and things like that. I mean, obviously, we're trying to keep a theme here. Then with respect to the changeable message board sign or the electronic sign, that's come up in the past
Right.
as well from the standpoint of downtown. The first things that come to mind, and Director Morimoto can jump in, it's good to know if that's what we feel, because I think that some of it has to do with the right-of-way and where it can be placed and where it fits, not that it can't be done, but as we understand with Union Pacific and Metro being involved, IDOT, we'll have to figure out where and how. And I mean, I'm not so much concerned about utilities and things like that. Those all have costs, but of course, that we have to deal with. But just getting it to a place, what are your thoughts?
Yes, particularly at least by the metro station itself, the right-of-way is at its widest, is right where we're situating the primary warming shelter building. And of course, as you go westward along 14, it narrows actually
more.
considerably. So leaves less opportunity for getting a sign to have the appropriate size and width and still meet the IDOT clearances away from the curb and the railroad from the platform. Not to say that there could be other locations along the 14 corridor that we could explore. But I think at this point, the prime areas that would be probably suitable for that type of use will need to be taken up by the train station only because that's the only area to get the depth we need there.
Sure. And that sign that Mike Ryan was giving us was one of the pole signs with the changeable letters. And it was considerably higher than, any kind of a monument sign. Maybe we look again at over in front of Veterans Park where the water pump or water fountain is.
Yeah, on the other side.
Yeah. I think
We
Foxborough
can,
Grove is-
Well,
we
that
can
would be-
kind of go on our own on
Explore some
that.
opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when we're down there doing streetscaping type work and other amenities right around that corridor, it makes sense to coordinate things.
Sure.
Whether it be on this site or not. So yes, we can do that. I don't know that it'll be Metra's place if it's across the street.
No, that's fine.
I mean, we can try to come up with some ideas that you can then later consider, see if this could fit someplace.
Thank you.
It's come up repeatedly over the years.
Eric, were you looking for any consensus regarding the solar film?
Just some direction if it's something we want to continue to pursue and investigate.
Yes.
Thoughts on that?
I would continue to keep it as a bid option, so
I'd
we
like
have
to look at it as an
flexibility.
option and just see what the cost,
Yeah.
we're putting it all together where it comes in.
Yep.
So that's the film, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
film.
3M film.
Okay.
Eric, I have a comment on the design. To me, I'm struggling a little bit with the peak. It seems, I don't know what the measurement is between the two ends of it horizontally, but it seems like it's going to be a very steep.
The angles are probably a little bit misleading. It has two different pitches to it. I don't know if you can see the cursor here.
Yeah, it's hard to see how it blends in.
This part here does have a steeper peak or roof pitch than the lower portion of it. So yes, this part will be a little bit steeper, but they're going to be incorporated into obviously an angle that is maintainable.
So could you bring the peak the point of the peak, could you bring that down, widen the base of it a little bit so it doesn't look so spaceship-like? It looks very pointy to me.
Hey, Rick, look on the second page of your handout, kind of gives a side view, and that is substantially
Yeah,
lower.
that was my second point, because the first picture and the second picture are not the same.
Right, I agree.
So, and nor is the drawing on the, that we're looking at on the screen.
Oh, yeah,
The
you're right.
drawing on the screen is page 1. What's on page 2 is not what's on the screen or page 1.
Right.
So if page 2 is doable, which brings the peak down, I mean, I'm just asking because I don't know, you know, which in fact is the most accurate version. If page 2 peak, you see how much lower that
Yeah, it
is
is,
in the
yeah,
roof line?
exactly.
Yeah.
You don't want it to peak up to the top of the roof, is
Okay.
what you're saying.
It's very confusing when
I
you look
agree.
at all the others, because the big pictures show a peak that goes to the top of the roof line.
Yeah.
And it's only if you look over in the corner that you see that, but,
The two wings on both ends of the building were the covered porch area and then where the ticket agent are on the opposite side. Those do have a lower peak elevation at the top,
okay, so,
which results obviously in a different angle here.
however, I think if you look at the upper right-hand corner picture, so let's discount the other two pictures. It would seem to me that you could easily put a cupola on the top of a building that had the peak that says Cary, and it would not detract. In fact, in my opinion, it would enhance the look of this building. I don't agree with the comments made in this by the architect that I thought I read something that they didn't feel that it would be,
Would detract.
would compete. I don't think at all it competes with a lower peak. And in fact, if you look at the picture of whatever property that is on page 2, I don't know if that's a real property or if that was something that was made up. Both of those look pretty good with it.
Yeah, they-
One's Fox
Yeah.
River Grove
Yeah.
and the other one is Bensonville. They're
I mean, to me, they both look pretty good with that there, and I don't think it detracts from the building at all. That's just my opinion. Other than that, I think everything looks much improved. I just think a cupola, again, kind of breaks up that long expanse. We have a long skinny building, and anything you can do to break up a long skinny run, to me, seems.
I know we can't widen the base of the rooftop because the projection of the overhang is limited by the encroachment to IDOT. That's
I
part of
don't
the
mean, I don't
limits
mean
there.
that. Can I show you?
But we could, sure.
So, well, this is really what I mean. I'm simply draw it. It's much easier. So this is what I see on the upper left-hand corner. That may or may not be accurate. It seems to me like you're saying the upper right-hand corner is accurate in terms of the height of the peak.
Yeah, they're just, it's the perspective and the angle, obviously, because they're both accurate. But yeah, the one on the upper right is probably showing that
Different.
angle is showing the difference the best for you.
Do I have
I know what you're
the wrong
saying.
glasses on or something? Because this is clearly right up
Right.
to the peak, and this is not. So these two are not the same picture.
It's all the
This
perspective
peak,
from where the eye of
Talking
the
about the
This
picture
peak,
taker
that-
is
if that
with
peak
our
is like
sign
this,
right
if
here.
it's
This is
top
what
of the
he's
roof
saying
line.
Peak is like this. You-
is probably the most evident
So
of
it's
the
the front.
okay.
the pitch.
So what I'm asking, Chris, is can you, assuming it's this one here, instead of being so abrupt, can it just be, and I don't mean going out into metro area, I mean just open it up this way so it doesn't look so, I mean, this looks like a teepee. And I think you got plenty of
Oh, you mean the
room. Pardon me?
You have to lower the overall height, since the control point on the bottom is fixed with, yeah, to make the
I
angle
get what
more
you're saying.
exact.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, and yeah, I do think it does look kind of pitchy.
And when you, I mean, I don't care what anybody says, but if you look at this picture and this picture, this appears to be some percentage lower than the.
Correct, the upper right-hand corner
Than the
does.
roof. Exactly. It looks like it's, I don't know what the scale is,
Do
but
you see this here, where it looks blended out? It actually
of course I
comes
see
out
that
like
there.
that.
Do you see this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, well then explain the difference if they're the same, because they ain't the same. I don't think they're
We're
the
just
same.
trying to understand what you want. And so it sounds like the goal would be to to
To
broaden
not make
that
it
out.
quite as peaky.
If you
Yeah,
broaden it
and I
out
can
and
also
the peak
answer-
is lower, it seems like you could have a couple on it. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. on the
Well,
top then.
and, I mean, two things. One, we had followed up with the architect regarding the earlier request about, is there a way to round that and have it be a rounded edge instead? That was brought up. It can be, what we were told is that it affects the roofing material around the top of that. It becomes like a metal sheeting, which is okay. I mean, and the cost is, there's cost, but it's not a deal breaker cost. To be able to do that, it just has a different look. This keeps that from occurring. We can talk to them about what that does to design below it to make it broader and lower.
Yeah.
Now,
I understand
if
what
you
you're
want,
saying.
I mean, but if, it sounds like the objective of doing that is not just because that looks better, it's to get a cupola on
It's
there.
both.
Okay.
To me, even if you don't put it on there, that looks
Too peaked.
way pitched, way too
Okay.
pointy.
So you can look
so-
at the one in Bensonville, and it's got the pitch, and then it's got the cupola on top of it,
Yeah, I mean,
which
does
does
it
look nice.
Yeah, it seems like it has a character line, which ours doesn't, because ours is straight all the way across. That's all I'm saying. I think the board, and we're not all here today, I believe when we talked about this, all kind of like that architectural feature of the cupola. And somewhere during this process, it went away, perhaps because the scale of this building may not lend itself to that. And I totally agree that if you have that really pitched middle peak, it would look lousy. But if in fact that middle peak is going to be below the roof line, I think it actually would look pretty nice.
No, I think, and we can, and I think the stem of the architect's comments about kind of being cohesive with the vintage look, it's not so much that it couldn't, and we can do it if that's the desire of the board. He's pointing out the fact that with these shapes, the authentic vintage look with this kind of roof line, as far as a traditional train depots, introducing the cupola would be mixing a lot of different separate styles, which has occurred obviously in a lot of other stations. So it would be maybe it's from the, I don't want to say a snobby architect perspective, but from that perspective, it would be mixing up a little things and creating kind of a mixture of things as opposed to one true vintage element. But if that's the direction we would like to go, we can definitely consider the schedule right now, partially because of the second round of
Well,
presentations, but
I guess
right of
what
access
I'm hearing
as
is
well.
goal number one is to talk about broadening out that peak. We have to have that, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that'd be good.
As it relates to the cupola, the architect has said, from a design standpoint, it doesn't fit. That doesn't mean we have to agree, but that's what he said. I mean, he said it multiple times. It's not so much a cost issue, it's just, does it fit the mold? And, obviously, we have the mayor and others that have had a strong opinion about cupola or no cupola. The architect says no cupola, we say maybe cupola. So, yes, we can draw a picture, and no, we don't want to wait meetings to meetings, but if there can be some consensus that we mock something up to look at that, and to those that is extremely important to, if we understand who that is, we can talk to you one-off, just deal with it. Unless other trustees feel like, that doesn't work. We always have time to add schedule, but we don't want to lose, we don't have any meeting in August, or first meeting in August. We'd like to move along so we get this to design.
I do have one further question on that. Do you know, Eric or Chris or Mark, is there any historic significance to that cupola? Has it been on that station for, I mean, there have been people that have come here and said, our train station is of historic significance, which in my opinion, it is not.
Well, from 1985.
Okay, so that's not historic.
All that way.
So there is no reason. I thought if it was a very, 50
moving
or
on to
60
the-
years old, maybe we, right, exactly, transplant it and put it someplace else, but that doesn't appear to be the case. So,
I don't think so.
okay.
Could check into that.
But as far as direction is concerned, Chris, I'm okay either way. I would just like to see a
All right.
picture of it, that's all.
We'll get it drawn, and we'll share it, and I'll ask for your feedback, and each of you can comment back to me individually on what you think.
And I just have a question.
Yeah.
So with this drawing, I mean, I was looking at the Grays Lake Station.
Yes.
Like I noticed there's some little detail in there. I mean, this drawing, we can always add little detail touches if we wanted to. Like, the little,
Well,
Sorry,
good.
I don't know what
I'll
these
answer
things
it from a
are called.
non-engineering
Oh.
standpoint, and then you can pick up behind.
Yeah.
part of what we're doing here is we're using technology to manage design costs at this
Okay.
level. And so that is why when we talk about scale earlier in this conversation, there are a tad bit of trade-offs. Because this has not yet been reduced to plans yet, which then get drawn up and then ultimately have to get sent to Metra. Well, actually before that, have to get sent. So I think there are some tweaks that can be made to some extent. I mean, or are we done? I mean, she's saying that, and I understand, I've been to the Grays Lake Station, there are a couple window things or otherwise that we might
Yeah,
want to
there-
add.
Corbels that
I don't
are
know what those
kind of
are.
between the wall and the
Colonnades at
roof,
the
is that I think what you're referring to?
I'm sorry?
The corbels between the
Yes.
wall and the roof?
Yes, that's what I'm referring to.
What is that in English so we can?
Corbels,
Decorative
just decorative.
elements between the,
Yeah, it looks like I see them on
Soffit in the
Hinsdale,
wall.
Fox Lake, Grays Lake.
This right here.
So the point is, because I'm just trying to make sure we're
It's a
clear.
design.
I had
element for
asked
something.
Muller
I
about
agree.
those
Design element.
features, and those are things that could be added, but they add maintenance, and that's one thing he kind of warned us about. And then they add cost, obviously.
Okay,
Right now, as shown, we're probably skirting the edge of our budget at this point. So we're
Okay.
going to have to make some design trade-offs moving forward as the more we add, we'll have to take away some other items.
okay,
The other thing they were also looking for was in that vintage element, they were looking for kind of creating I think, a streamlined, very timeless structure that, again, they were trying not to pull too many different architectural elements from like 4 or 5 different styles,
Yeah.
trying to give us one cohesive style.
And he doesn't think the Corbels is part of that.
In the,
Is that
in
what
the
he said?
architecture, I'm not an architect, I'll say the snobby architecture side says that those are 2 different styles that shouldn't be
Okay.
mixed, should not be mixed. But should not is not, could not. If
Sure.
we want it, we can do it.
Well, I guess we're doing this minus the architect tonight for budgetary reasons. But I mean, the theme is that there might be some decorative items, cupola, corbels, or other things similar to it that might add the Cary touch to it
Yeah,
that
this-
we might not have seen that might, in this last picture, you know what I'm saying?
Trim and materials can be, will be,
Okay.
through the detailed design process, things that we can try and add little finishing touches,
Sure.
okay,
for sure.
very good.
Are there are we still getting the warming shelters someplace down the tracks there?
Yes, there will be the second shelter still in the mix, correct?
Okay.
It won't look exactly like the main building. It'll just have more of a simplified, because it's so much smaller.
Sure.
But it'll have the same materials and complement the look of the station.
Thank you.
Any other feedback for the train station?
That's an important conversation to have. Obviously, as you see in these other suburban stations, there's all kinds of different architecture that's blended into some of these buildings, some of which have been refurbed over the years and different things have been done over time. So it's not a static, design element. Eric and I are just not trying to keep you away from creativity. It's just solely from a design and build it standpoint, trying to move it along. So we'll try to add a few more comments back. I think that's reasonable, and we'll send it out to the board for that final picture look, right? Before it goes then to Metra and back through the process.
Right.
Okay.
So time is of the essence.
Yes, it will have to be very fast because we're approaching the point where we need to be able to hit this late summer, fall design completion in order to get it let into Metro's hands for the construction phase to hit that 2017 timeline.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Now, video presentation regarding service-oriented business uses in retail districts.
Thanks. This was something, and you'll get the full copy of it in your emails, but there was a lot of real estate speak in here. But since I've been on the board and before, when I was just a regular civilian, there were some things that I found that the village restricted. Back in 1998 was the last time that we visited our code, and I appreciate that we're looking at the UDO, and we have an opportunity to fix some things, and that would be getting rid of the conditional use for some businesses that should be permitted. Can you go on to the third slide? We're talking about, in this slide, it's talking about the economy. It's sputtering along here in 2016. This was obviously done before Brexit, and I don't know where that has to do. But this page, the reason I highlight it is because it talks about government spending, it talks about consumers spending more. The economy is coming up, and we think that there's going to be significant investments. We've seen it in our community. Pop the next one. Commercial real estate investments are going up as well. What I wanted to highlight on this one is the, in short, the commercial real estate market is bifurcated with the majority of buildings, 81% are relatively small. And that's what we have here in Cary. Commercial sales transactions, they span the price spectrum, but they tend to be measured and reported based on size. And so when we have an opportunity to lease or sell our spaces, I think we have an opportunity and a responsibility to those businesses to do that. This is talking about the future. And again, it talks about declining sales volume, but it talks about the fact that retail is declining as far as the importance. It slipped now to third in the ranks of businesses that are being sold, buildings that are being sold, is for retail. And then I'll just go to my thing. Before I continue, I did take some of this from Bruce Kaplan. Some of you might remember. This was something that Bruce was very interested about. In 2011, the board gave a compromise about the conditional use permits, and I know it's something that we're going to look at. So what I'm asking you as trustees and as board is just to at least look at when we go through the UDO next year and give it a full thoughtful. Cary should modify our ordinance to allow office and service uses in the B zones without requiring a special use. I asked the question about how many special use requests for office and service uses have been denied in the last 5 years. I believe the answer is none, 0. Brian, tell us how many we've had. I think I got to go back, maybe 8 years, and it's still 0. And so if it is 0, you have to ask yourself then, why do we have that impediment? And it is an impediment. And during our review of the UDO, we can get on the right side of this issue. We could still have eyes on those businesses that are coming in, just as we do today. There are things that we don't see as a board that staff deals with at the counter and at the front letter. So that's not going to change. But here's the thing. I believe that government needs to let the free market work its magic. If a developer comes to town and he sees a lot of vacancies in our strip centers, he assumes that there is no demand for his product, and he'll go to another town where spaces are filled up and where demand can be demonstrated. If that same developer comes to Cary and sees all our spaces filled, he'll assume that we have a need for more shopping centers, and they'll be more likely to build. I mean, that just makes sense. The service and office uses support the retail uses. They do, to some extent, create some foot traffic, although I'm not as convinced of that as Bruce is. But it is a point that they do. The point is that simply mandating or dictating that retailers go into our vacant spaces doesn't make it happen. We know that. We've all seen it and lamented about it. And it doesn't even make it more likely to happen. It just isn't. And so the market dictates that, not the government. I know we see this in the other towns. I know Brian and Jake and Chris, thanks for looking at that. What we're just asking, there are probably about 10 uses that are on the conditional where it requires a special use permit. And those are things that are driving businesses away. And if we are going to be that destination for the businesses into the future, I'd ask that we make a thoughtful consideration and consider repealing some of those during our UDO. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you.
I think we should have some dialogue on that. Yeah.
So is there any, Dave, is there any particular types of businesses that you would like to, since you suggested we
Yes.
have some?
Yes, where's my thing here? Sure there is, right after I
Well,
went out of there.
while
Yeah.
you're looking for that, I will tell you that as I think the mayor also knows that trustee Kaplan, when he was on the board, was in favor of bringing pawn shops, betting parlors, and tattoo shops to Cary, which are not uses that I certainly would like to see. And if those are any of the ones that you'd like to have scratched off, I personally would not be in favor of those.
I'm not talking about those. What I'm talking about is, and I can't believe I can't get my list back up here. But there were about 10 different businesses, like the Mathnasium, those type of business service organizations, the Athletico, type. No, not pawn shops and things to cheap and carry, but things to get with, where we have to realize that those brick and mortar stores, since the Amazons and all that, they are a reality, and it's not going to be the future, and we have to look towards that. Rick, I can't believe I will send you the list of the 10 businesses that were permitted before 1998 without a conditional use, and then in 1998, nearly 20 years ago, was the last time that we looked at these.
In my experience, I think a good case that we can talk about at a high level, and Jacob can assist me if you want to come to the mic. We had this debate at length approximately 3.5 years ago when we had a proposal from Athletico Physical Therapy to go into the retail center by Cary Square. Are you familiar with where Athletico now is? That had been vacant for some time, and at the time, through debate and discussion, I believe there was a proposed 7-year lease. They had to come in through the process to get consideration for approval for the village to allow it. It was a controversial decision at the time for the village board, and it was approved. And at the time, or right near that time, the lighting store, which is still empty on the end of that strip center, was also vacant. And it was viewed that filling what now is the Athletico space and then the lighting space with maybe a service use might be a bad move if the economy comes back. Obviously, sales tax is a benefit to a municipality for costs, et cetera, revenue. In that example, you still have vacancies in that center. It's not been well maintained. Let's be frank. It's been through bankruptcy at least once. And, we're 3 or 4 years into the 7-year term, and there is a business there that might not necessarily have been at that time what the board viewed to be optimal. But that was the latest heavily debated example that we had with respect to this. Of course, the Mathnasium case came up. And that might be a one-off situation there because of the condition of that building, frankly. We have good businesses in that center.
Yeah.
But on the end, it's still empty. And there are some optimistic concepts on the table now for that lighting store, space, but that ultimately becomes the policy debate. Do you lock it up, in that fashion? I mean, it has to come back through the conditional use permit process, and consistently, brokers such as former trustee Kaplan and others in that realtor space, they don't like and their clients don't apparently like the 60, 90-day lag time to go through zoning, village board, et cetera. I mean, there's like 2 issues. One, they don't like the time lag because their leases are more bang, bang, bang type situations typically. And then they want to just have an automatic and not have to debate the use, which the board has wanted to debate at times for some of the uses such as what trustee Dudek just described. So I think we just need to be thoughtful about what we send back to the quote-unquote UDO process. Staff agrees that is the right space for this, but I just want to make sure expectations are set right for what this means if this does go to the UDO space from the village board. I mean, there may be hybrids that we haven't even thought of, some of which you might want to change, some you might not. So just some history.
So are you recommending the change, or are you recommending it stay the same?
What I'm recommending is that, and we've launched the UDO process. We have a firm that's hired. They're starting their work. We're giving them data. And as it was explained, and we went through this morning, this came in from trustee Chapman late last week. And yes, I'm saying that that's a good place for it. But no, I don't think we necessarily should send it unless the 5 of you tonight are clear that you want this changed with the mandate that you must change it, the code. I mean, I would suggest that we go into it with the mindset that explore it, look at it, what are the pros, cons, are there hybrids, are there some uses that are acceptable, some not, is that legal to regulate or not? So that we look at this logically, as opposed to possibly tonight giving a trustee or other trustees or the public or a broker a confusing message that we're sending it back to UDO to do this. I'm not suggesting you say that tonight, but I am just suggesting that we go into the UDO with our eyes wide open. Brian, did you have anything to add to that for the village board committee?
Part of the UDO process, it's going to be having public workshops and meetings with brokers or development community from that standpoint to get feedback on our existing codes. So I personally believe that's the right avenue to have a discussion, with that development community to see what type of issues they've had encountered with our code and if there are needs for changes, and if, from that discussion, if the board is willing to make those types of changes. So I believe that is the very appropriate process. I agree with Trustee Chapman. It's something that we should look at from a standpoint of is that brought in the type of development that we want to see, or the type of uses that we want to see in the community, just from the time that we didn't have those in 1998, uses were allowed in those districts. Then the code was modified to remove it, and for 13 years it wasn't permitted use. What type of restrictions did that have on development activity in the community? So I think it's just something we need to look at and vet throughout that process.
Jacob, after the meeting, then would you just forward that email that I sent with the article and the list that you had? And then you'll all have it, and you guys can all look at it at your leisure, and something to think about.
Well, I appreciate the intention. I think you want to revisit things, and businesses have to be pliable with what the demands of people are. Services change. Like you said, people are shopping on Amazon, or people are doing things different. If we're doing the UDO, this is a perfect time to at least look at it and reevaluate it all. So
Thank you.
I appreciate you doing the research for that and getting it out to us.
Any other comments? Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss real estate purchase or lease, section 122C5, and personnel, section 122C1.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?